GamingBolt presents 15 gaming cliches you couldn't live without. We often complain about overused cliches in games, but sometimes we know we just couldn't live without them. Here's our list of 15 game cliches none of us can live without. Zombie outbreaks. Every time a new zombie game is announced, we all collectively sigh, another zombie game. But we also know that sometimes those zombie games are good, and sometimes it has to be zombies. Would Telltale's The Walking Dead be any good if you took out the zombies? How would that even work? Even games that have enemies that function like zombies but won't call them that, like The Last of Us, worked perfectly because of the infected creatures. Red barrel explosions. It's pretty surprising that there are still games that have random red barrels in them that explode when you shoot them. You know why? Because as silly as they are, it's still fun shooting one of them and watching any nearby enemies go flying. Boss weak spots. We all laugh at games that feature bosses with obvious weak spots, but those are often the best boss fights. Having an enemy with a normal health bar that you can attack anywhere is often too easy. When a game does the weak spot thing right, like Shadow of the Colossus, it makes boss battles feel like epic encounters, which is exactly how they should feel. Escort missions. Escort missions are usually a drag, mostly because the AI of the character you're escorting is often terrible. But done right, an escort mission can add a lot to the game. We all hated her, but who could imagine Resident Evil 4 without Ashley constantly getting in the way and whining at you? And do you remember Mario and Yoshi's Island? That whole game was basically an escort mission, and it was great. Fetch quests. When done poorly, fetch quests are tedious and annoying. When they're done right though, fetch quests can add a lot to the game. They can build a story and extend gameplay. Metroidvania games are a great example of this because they encourage backtracking. You go through an old area when you get killed a lot, but all of a sudden, you're a lot stronger. Same goes for regular fetch quests. Minigames. Minigames are a great way to break up the action. They're usually badly implemented and not often well explained why you have to stop the game to play cards or whatever it is. Old school 3D platforms were always great at this, like the Jak and Daxter series introducing racing, hoverboard tournaments, and little tower defense games to name a few. Like escort missions and fetch quests, when implemented right, minigames can add a ton to a game and make it more enjoyable. Although, let's not talk about Blitzball from Final Fantasy. Cutscene death of a main boss. Having a boss die in a cutscene can be a drag, but it can also provide great moments. Simply killing a boss can be satisfying, but watching beating the crap out of them in a cutscene and then watching the protagonist dramatically killing them can be even more satisfying than doing it yourself. Or maybe some other enemy will prove they're even tougher than the big bad by killing them. Killing a boss in a cutscene can provide some great cinematic moments. Needlessly complicated lock. Bethesda games are always big offenders on this one. You'll come across a super hard locked safe, only to crack it open and find there's nothing inside. However, these function as minigames on their own. They break up the usual action of the game, and they usually offer some kind of reward in experience points, if nothing else. Invisible walls. Invisible walls can get in the way sometimes, but more than often they're there for good reason. If you were to remove invisible walls for a certain game, there would be nothing to stop you from walking out of the level into a bottomless pit. There also wouldn't be anything guiding you where to go. A good developer should be able to guide the player without them, but sometimes invisible walls are better than endlessly walking around levels trying to figure out where to go, right? One of the franchises that does this really well is the Souls series, where behind invisible walls are hidden ways for secret areas, bosses, and rare items. Multi-stage boss fights. These can get really frustrating. You beat a boss, then all of a sudden it transforms into something else and you have to fight it all over again, and that next fight is always harder than the last. But these guys serve a purpose. They're a great way of keeping you on your toes, and they provide a great challenge. For example, the fight against Volgin in Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater is divided into several sections. First you take him head on, then he chases you in a Shagohod, and you finally destroy the nuclear-capable machine, ending this long and multi-stage boss fight once and for all. Bullet time. I'm not sure if anyone calls slow-mo bullet time anymore, but it still finds a way into games occasionally. Bullet time is a great way to give players that extra second to pull trick shots off if you care about doing that sort of thing, but it can also provide a leg up in a tough fight. And you have to admit, jumping backwards and shooting someone in the head in slow-mo is pretty damn cool, and no one does it better than Max Payne. Backtracking to old areas. Again, Metroidvania games are a perfect example of how and why this cliche can be great. You're stronger than you were before, so you can beat enemies with ease, and you get to explore new secret areas that you couldn't before with your new abilities. Like many cliches on this list, it can be annoying when done poorly, but when done well, it's another great tool in a developer's toolbox. Regenerating health. Going back over old areas to find health pickups is an example of bad backtracking. That's exactly what regenerating health fixes. Sure, it doesn't make much sense in the real world, but does strapping a medical kit to your face make any more sense? With regenerating health, you're allowed to take more risks and play more aggressively without having to worry about searching every empty nook and cranny for a health kit that you probably know isn't there. Carrying hundreds of items and weapons. This shouldn't even need defending. How dull is it to get into a first-person shooter that only lets you carry 2 weapons at a time? Much like regenerating health, it doesn't make much sense for you to be able to carry hundreds of pounds of gear without backpacks or anything, like in Skyrim. But who cares? With a high weight carrying limit, or none at all like in the Metal Gear Solid franchise, you're free to pick up whatever junk you want and hold on to it forever, and that kind of freedom is something games need more of. Use this switch to go ahead. Remember old school first-person shooters that had you fight through rooms of enemies, then a switch would come out of nowhere that opens up the next area when you press it? These switches make it so that you can't just run past a tough room. You have to stay and fight, which always provides a fun challenge. Many games implement this in a smart manner, putting switches across a big room wherein you have to solve a puzzle to proceed across. Once again, this is one of those cliches that, if done right, can greatly benefit gameplay.
And that wraps it up. What are your thoughts about this? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and share it on Twitter and Facebook. And why not consider subscribing? We upload some really cool videos almost every day. Thank you for watching this video, and happy gaming!